The appointment still belongs on the calendar. The bill still needs to be opened. The work still has to be done. And that family conversation will not become easier merely because you keep postponing it. Casting your care upon God does not mean pretending that no responsibility remains, but neither does responsibility mean you must carry a mind full of dread every waking hour. That is where many sincere believers become confused. They imagine there are only two choices. Either they worry about everything and call that being responsible, or they stop caring about everything and call that trusting God. But those are not the only choices, and neither one is biblical surrender. Listen closely to the movement in 1 Peter 5-6 and 7. We are told to humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God, trusting that He will lift us up in the proper time, and to cast all our care upon Him because He cares for us. Notice that humility and care casting belong together. Humility says, God is God and I am not. I will obey what He gives me to do, but I will not claim the power to govern every result. That is not carelessness. It is proper order. Some people feel that if they stop worrying, they will forget something important. They are afraid peace will make them lazy. They think, if I do not rehearse every possible disaster, who will keep this situation under control? So they lie awake, review every decision, repeat every conversation, predict every reaction, and try to manage tomorrow before tomorrow arrives. They call it concern. They call it preparation. But much of the time it is fear wearing the clothes of responsibility. Then there is the error on the other side. Someone says, I have given it to God, but will not make the call, seek appropriate help, prepare for the meeting, or speak the truth that must be spoken. That is not surrender either. Trust does not excuse passivity. Faith does not make obedience unnecessary. You may know exactly what this overload feels like. Your body is tired, but your thoughts will not settle. One decision seems connected to 5 more decisions. A concern about health touches money. Pressure at work follows you home. Family tension enters the room before anybody says a word. And beneath it all is the exhausting suspicion that every outcome depends upon your ability to think about everything at once. But God does not require anxiety as proof that you are responsible. Here is the proposition we are going to test against Scripture and then carry into ordinary life. Cast the care, keep the responsibility, and entrust the outcome to God. Say those 3 parts quietly in your own mind. The care goes to God. The responsibility remains with you. The outcome is entrusted to Him. We will apply that rule to health, money, work, and family decisions. We will ask what belongs in prayer, what requires truthful thinking, what calls for wise planning, and what must finally be released because it lies beyond your control. And we are going to be very practical about it, because vague surrender does not help much when the appointment is Tuesday morning or the payment is due Friday. For now let this much bring some relief. Peace will not make you careless. You do not have to choose between anxious control and irresponsible avoidance. There is another way, a way in which your heart can become quiet while your hands remain faithful. So let us slow down over Peter's words and identify precisely what is being cast upon God, because until we know what leaves our hands, we will not understand what properly remains there. Peter does not give the command to cast our care as an isolated word of encouragement. He joins it to humility. Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, he says, and cast all your care upon Him because He cares for you. That order matters. Care casting is not a technique for making uncomfortable feelings disappear. It is the practical expression of humility before a God whose strength and concern have already been established. You see, humility does 2 things at once. It accepts the duty God has placed before us, and it releases the authority He has not given us. It says, I will do what obedience requires, but I will not pretend that I can command the future. That is the heart of the passage. The care belongs in God's hands. obedience remains in mind. What then is being cast? Not every thought about the situation, not ordinary attention, not prudent concern. You do not have to forget the facts or act as if the problem is imaginary. Casting care is not denial. It is not emotional numbness. It is not staring at a serious circumstance and saying nothing is wrong when something plainly needs attention. What leaves your hands is the anxious weight of attempted control, the inward demand that you must guarantee what happens next, prevent every possible loss, anticipate every response, and hold the whole matter together by the force of continuous thought. That burden is heavier than any assignment God has actually given you, because it includes outcomes you do not possess the authority to produce. Now, that is where conviction may be needed. We usually think of pride as boasting, showing off, or demanding attention. But worry can contain a quieter form of self-exaltation. The troubled mind begins to act as though it must occupy the place of final control. It says, perhaps without words, if I stop carrying this, everything may fall apart. If I do not keep rehearsing it, there will be no one governing the result. But are you governing the result now? No. You may influence a situation, you may make a wise decision, you may correct an error, you may prepare carefully, but you cannot guarantee another person's choice, reverse every consequence, or secure the future by worrying over it. Humility admits the boundary. Imagine carrying a heavy case that contains a written assignment. The case is crushing your arms, yet the instruction inside it is clear. When you hand that case to someone strong enough to carry it, you do not have to throw away the assignment. The weight changes hands, the instruction does not disappear. You can still read the next line and obey it. That is what Peter's command helps us see. Give God the crushing burden, but retain the instruction that belongs to you. If truth must be told, tell it. If work must be completed, do it. If planning is necessary, plan wisely. If treatment is appropriate, receive it. If restitution must be made, make it. If communication has been neglected, begin it. If there is a next step genuinely assigned to you, take it. The passage tells you to transfer anxious weight to God, not to transfer your obedience to somebody else. And notice the ground of that transfer. Because He cares for you. You are not casting your burden into an empty distance. You are placing it upon the God whose concern for you is already declared. Trust does not begin with your ability to feel calm. It begins with His care. Feelings may settle quickly, or they may take time to follow, but the act of surrender rests on who receives the burden. Now, do not misunderstand this. Worry resists humility by trying to do God's part, but passivity resists humility by refusing to do your own. One says, I must control the outcome. The other says, I have no obligation to act. Both put the self in the wrong position. Humility relinquishes unauthorized control and accepts authorized duty. So make the distinction plain enough to remember the care belongs in God's hands. Obedience remains in mine. The pressure to guarantee the future goes to Him. The next truthful, wise, faithful action remains with me. Once we understand that, we can take any troubled situation and sort it carefully. What is anxious weight? What is my responsibility? What is an outcome I cannot control? That is the practical rule we must build next. Now let us put that rule to work. Take one troubled situation and in your mind divide it into 3 columns. The first column is the care to be cast. The second is the responsibility to be carried. The third is the outcome that cannot be guaranteed. Peace becomes practical when every part of the problem is assigned to its proper owner. In the first column, place the dread, the shame, the catastrophic rehearsal, and the demand for certainty. Put there every imagined disaster you keep playing before it has happened. Put there the pressure that says, I must know now how this will end. These things are not instructions. They do not become useful merely because you repeat them with great intensity. They are cares to be presented to God. The second column contains what is honestly yours to do. Depending on the situation, that may include specific prayer, gathering reliable information, scheduling what needs to be scheduled, doing necessary work, seeking wise counsel, receiving appropriate treatment, making a budget, offering an apology, or following through on a promise. This column is not filled by fear. It is filled by obedience. Then there is the third column, the outcome. Put there other people's choices, the timing you cannot command, the final result, unforeseen events, and all the unknowns belonging to tomorrow. You may prepare for possibilities, certainly. You may influence what happens through wisdom and diligence, but preparation is not sovereignty, and influence is not a guarantee. You see what worry does. It reaches across the boundary, takes something from the outcome column, and drags it into the responsibility column. Then it tells you this is yours. You must secure this result. But you cannot make another person respond correctly. You cannot force every circumstance to arrive on schedule. You cannot discover tomorrow's facts by rehearsing tonight's fears. Passivity makes the opposite mistake. It takes something from the responsibility column and pushes it away, saying, God will handle that. No, if the act has been assigned to you, then faith does not erase it. Trusting God with the result does not excuse you from preparing, speaking, working, correcting, or following through. That exposes two sayings, which sound reasonable until you examine them. The first says, I must keep worrying or I will become careless. But worry is not the power that makes you responsible. You can write down the task, set a reminder, ask for counsel, prepare carefully, and complete what is required without spending the day predicting calamity. Diligence can stand on its own feet. It does not need anxiety to hold it upright. The second saying goes to the other extreme. If I have faith, I do not need to prepare. Well, faith is not an excuse for neglect. If preparation belongs to your assignment, refusing to prepare is not confidence in God. It is refusal to carry your part. Real surrender releases the anxious weight and strengthens honest obedience. Take the appointment as a quick demonstration. What belongs in the care column? The dread that rises whenever you think of it, the imagined bad news, the shame that may surround the concern, and the demand to know the result before the appointment occurs. Cast that care upon God. What belongs in the responsibility column? Keep the appointment. Gather the information you were asked to bring. Write down the questions that need honest answers. Follow reasonable instructions. That is your present assignment. What belongs in the outcome column? What the examination will reveal, how quickly an answer may come, what events you could not foresee, and everything that cannot be known before its time. You release that result because you cannot produce certainty by mental strain. Now, the problem may still be serious, but it is no longer one tangled mass. The care has an owner, the duty has an owner, the outcome has an owner. You release the anxious weight, perform the assigned duty, and refuse to impersonate the ruler of results. So when you face a troubled situation, ask one clear question. After I have prayed, what honest act of obedience is actually mine today? That question cuts through mental fog. It does not answer every unknown, but it identifies the ground beneath your feet. And that brings us to the next matter. Once the situation has been sorted, what does Scripture tell us to do when anxiety rises? How do prayer, truthful thinking, and faithful practice work together? For that, we need to follow the full movement of Philippians 4. Philippians 4 answers the question directly. What replaces worry? Not emptying the mind, Not pretending the trouble is small, and not repeating, I must not be anxious, while anxiety keeps running in circles. The passage gives us a movement: prayer, supplication, thanksgiving, specific requests, guarded peace, disciplined thought, and practiced truth. Notice that Paul does more than prohibit anxiety. He tells us what to do with it. In everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, make your requests known to God. Anxiety is not merely pushed down, it is brought before God and given definite words. That matters, because anxiety often begins as a cloud. Something is wrong. Something may happen. I cannot manage this. Well, what exactly are you asking God for? Name it. Give me wisdom for this decision. Provide what is needed. Help me speak with patience and honesty. Strengthen me to do what is right. Guard the person I love. Lead me through what I cannot yet understand. A name request can be consciously entrusted. A vague dread merely circles. Supplication carries a sense of earnest asking. There is no rebuke here for bringing a real need with real feeling. You do not have to sound detached in order to sound spiritual. If the matter hurts, say so. If you are afraid, admit it. If you need help, ask for it plainly. Prayer is not a performance in which you hide the condition of your heart from the one who already knows it. And then Paul says, with thanksgiving. Now, do not misunderstand thanksgiving. It is not calling pain pleasant. It is not denying a loss, inventing a favorable report, or acting as though the desired answer has already appeared. Thanksgiving acknowledges God in the middle of what remains unresolved. It remembers that His character has not changed. His care has not been withdrawn, and His faithfulness did not begin with this present difficulty. You are saying, in effect, Father, this is hard, but you are still God. I bring this request to you because you care for me, and I thank you that I am not carrying it alone. Then comes the promise of peace. The peace of God guards the heart and mind in Christ Jesus. A guard does not announce that nothing difficult exists outside the gate. A guard keeps what is outside from taking possession within. The circumstance may remain. The answer may still be developing. The conversation may still be necessary. Yet the mind is no longer required to surrender itself to every fearful possibility. Peace is not proof that you have been guaranteed the outcome you prefer. It is evidence that the matter can be held before God without the matter ruling you. But the passage does not stop there. Many people stop reading once they hear about peace, as though prayer ends the process and the mind may then return to feeding on every frightening suggestion. Paul continues, direct your attention toward what is true, honorable, just, pure, lovely, commendable, excellent, and worthy of praise. In other words, after you have presented the request, do not rebuild the burden with undisciplined imagination. Ask what is true right now, not what is the worst thing I can picture, what is known, what is merely feared, what agrees with God's character, what thought will help me act faithfully. Then Paul moves from thought to practice. What has been learned, received, heard, and seen must be done. There it is again. Prayerful surrender does not cancel responsible conduct. Prayer transfers the burden. Truthful thought and obedient practice carry life forward. Does that mean you may never mention the matter to God again? No. You may return for strength, wisdom, comfort, and renewed steadiness. But returning for help is different from presenting the same fear as though God failed to hear you. You can revisit the request without reclaiming the demand to control its result. So rehearse the movement quietly now. Name the request in one clear sentence. Thank God for His care and faithfulness without pretending the difficulty does not hurt. Identify the next duty that honestly belongs to you. Then leave the result in His hand. Pray specifically. Think truthfully. Practice what is right. Let peace stand watch while obedience moves forward. And yet, Even with that process clearly before us, certain imitations will try to keep the burden alive. Worry may call itself love. Avoidance may call itself faith. Control may disguise itself as diligence. And numbness may masquerade as peace. Those counterfeits must be exposed. Let us begin with worry pretending to be love. A person says, I worry because I care. And the more deeply that person loves a family member, the more permission worry seems to receive. But ask the plain question, is this mental suffering serving the person I love? Does it provide wisdom? Does it offer protection? Does it produce a helpful action? Or am I repeatedly imagining harm and calling the pain of that imagination devotion? Healthy concern sees a need and looks for the next wise response. Consuming care keeps rehearsing disaster after the available response is already known. Love may pray, listen, encourage, give practical help, speak needed truth, or respect a boundary. Worry does none of those merely by continuing. So correct the counterfeit without condemning yourself. Give God the anxious weight. Perform whatever loving service is truly yours. And release the life of the other person from your attempted control. Then avoidance comes along and borrows the language of faith. A notice remains unopened. An appointment is missed. An apology is delayed. An inconvenient fact is ignored. And someone says, I am leaving it with God. Well, you may have left the envelope on the table, but that is not necessarily the same thing. Faith does not need ignorance in order to survive. It can face a fact without worshiping that fact. It can admit a mistake without surrendering to shame. It can hear difficult information and still depend upon God. Ask yourself, is there an action I am refusing? If the answer is yes, do not rename refusal as surrender. Cast the fear, accept the duty, and entrust what follows. Faith neither clings to worry nor hides from responsibility. It tells the truth about the next step. The third counterfeit is control dressed as diligence. Diligence prepares carefully. Control keeps preparing because it wants a guarantee. There is a difference. You can review the figures, organize the information, consider reasonable possibilities, and make a sound plan. But preparation eventually reaches its useful end. After that point, another hour of checking may add no wisdom at all. It only gives anxiety something respectable to do. It is like checking a locked door. One responsible check confirms that it is secure. A second may satisfy a moment of uncertainty. But if you return again and again, the door is not becoming increasingly locked. By the seventh inspection, the lock is no safer. Only your evening is shorter. So ask, am I still improving my response, or am I demanding certainty? Diligence does what can wisely be done. Control insists that enough effort must somehow remove every unknown. When preparation has done its proper work, stop. Place the remaining uncertainty where it belongs. Carry the assignment. Surrender the demand to guarantee its success. The fourth counterfeit is numbness, claiming to be peace. This one can sound especially spiritual because it speaks softly. It does not bother me, I do not care, I will not think about it. But peace does not require you to deny pain, silence grief, or refuse reality. A quiet voice can still be hiding a frightened heart. Remember, biblical prayer names the need honestly. If there is hurt, it may be confessed. If there is fear, it may be brought before God. If there is a difficult fact, it may be faced. Numbness disconnects from the matter. Peace remains present without being ruled by it. Ask, am I calling emotional shutdown peace? If so, the correction is not to force a dramatic feeling. It is simply to become truthful again. Name what hurts. Receive the help that is appropriate. Do what love and wisdom require, and leave the result with God. Now notice what all four counterfeits have in common. Worry overfunctions in thought. Avoidance underfunctions in action. Control exceeds the limits of useful preparation. Numbness refuses honest engagement. Yet each one misplaces the same three things: care, responsibility, and outcome. That gives you 4 diagnostic questions. Am I serving anyone by rehearsing this? Is there an action I am refusing? Am I demanding certainty that no amount of preparation can provide? Am I calling emotional shutdown peace? Do not use those questions as weapons against yourself. Use them as directions back to proper order. If worry is present, release the consuming care and choose loving service. If avoidance is present, face the assigned action. If control is present, finish reasonable preparation and surrender the guarantee. If numbness is present, tell the truth before God and re-enter responsible life. Worry is not love. Avoidance is not faith. Control is not diligence. Numbness is not peace. Responsible trust gives God the weight, keeps the duty, and releases the result. Now we can carry those questions into the places where the distinction becomes wonderfully practical. The appointment that must be kept, the bill that must be faced, the work that must be completed, and the family conversation that can no longer be postponed. Now take the rule into ordinary pressure. The required action will change from one situation to another, but the 3 questions remain the same. What burden am I carrying? What duty is actually mine? What result must remain outside my control? Ask them plainly, because peace becomes practical when responsibility is given definite limits. Consider a hypothetical health concern. The burden may be dread, the demand to know the diagnosis beforehand, or hours spent imagining every possible result. That is the care to cast. The duty may be to keep the appointment, describe symptoms honestly, prepare sensible questions, follow appropriate professional guidance, and obtain further help when needed. Prayer does not replace proper care. And if anxiety itself is seriously disrupting sleep, work, relationships, or daily functioning, seeking help from a clinician, counselor, pastor, or another qualified and trustworthy person may be part of the responsibility. What remains outside your control, the findings, the timing, the course of recovery, and facts that have not yet been discovered. You can enter the appointment responsibly without trying to carry its entire future through the door. The burden goes to God. The duty goes on the calendar. The result remains beyond your command. Now consider a hypothetical financial pressure. A bill arrives and shame begins speaking before the envelope is opened. Then catastrophic imagination takes over. This will ruin everything. There will be no way through. Stop and sort it. What burden am I carrying? Shame, panic, and the prediction of disaster. What duty is mine? Open the bill. Verify the amount and due date. Correct any error. Review the available resources. Make a workable plan. Communicate with the relevant party instead of disappearing. If necessary, ask a trustworthy family member, financial advisor, pastor, or other capable person to help you understand the options. And what result must remain outside your control? You cannot guarantee that every request will be granted or that no difficulty will follow. But you can deal truthfully with what is known. Responsible surrender does not stare at an unopened bill and call that peace. It faces the facts without allowing the facts to become a prophecy of ruin. Consider also a hypothetical family conversation. Perhaps something important has been delayed because you fear anger, rejection, or misunderstanding. What burden are you carrying? The attempt to arrange the other person's reaction before you speak. What duty is yours? Prepare words that are truthful and loving. Choose an appropriate time. Speak without manipulation. Listen carefully. Maintain necessary boundaries. And if you promise a later action, follow through. You may seek counsel from a pastor, counselor, or trusted family member before the conversation. That can be wisdom. But counsel cannot give you control over another heart. The other person may listen, resist, misunderstand, or need time. You are responsible for your honesty, your manner, your boundaries, and your promises. You are not responsible for manufacturing the response you desire. Then take a hypothetical work assignment. The burden may be fear of every possible failure and every judgment somebody might make. The duty is more limited. Clarify the actual assignment. Complete the next necessary task. Ask questions when the instructions are unclear, and communicate early when an obstacle threatens the work. A supervisor or trusted colleague may provide help that worry cannot. What must be released? Other people's opinions, unforeseen changes, and the guarantee that every effort will be received exactly as you hope. You see, the rule does not make health, money, family, and work identical. Each field requires its own wise response, but the ordering remains steady. Cast the dread, shame, catastrophic imagination, and demand for control. Carry the appointment, the factual review, the truthful conversation, and the actual assignment. Entrust the diagnosis, the final financial outcome, the other person's response, and the judgments you cannot govern. Say this to yourself when pressure rises: I can take the next responsible step without carrying the whole future inside that step. That is not neglect. That is bounded faithfulness. Casting care changes how responsibility is carried. It does not make responsibility disappear. And a decision made in daylight may still be challenged later. You may pray, act wisely, and feel settled, then find the same anxious thought returning when the room becomes quiet. The return of the thought does not prove that surrender failed. It simply raises the next practical question: how do you maintain the decision after the care has been cast? The answer begins with a distinction. A thought can return without the burden returning to your ownership. A feeling may rise before you have invited it. Your body may tighten, your mind may present an old possibility, and fear may knock with the same argument it used before. None of that means your prayer was empty. None of it means you have failed. Feelings do not always move at the speed of a settled decision. You see, surrender is not measured by whether an anxious sensation ever appears again. It is measured by what you do when it appears. Do you treat that feeling as a command? Do you reopen the whole case and begin trying once more to secure the result? Or do you calmly reaffirm what you have already entrusted to God? There are 4 simple movements to remember. First, notice and name the returning care. Say plainly, this is the fear about that result. Or, this is the demand to know what I cannot yet know. Naming it keeps a passing feeling from becoming the voice of authority. Second, recall what you entrusted to God. Father, I place this outcome in your care. You heard me then and you care for me now. You are not pretending that the matter vanished. You are remembering where you assigned its weight. Third, refuse to reopen the demand for control. That is important. You may need fresh strength, but you do not need to renegotiate ownership every time your feelings fluctuate. Say, I will not take responsibility for producing an outcome that is not mine to command. Fourth, return to the duty presently before you. If an action is scheduled, perform it when its time comes. If there is no useful action available now, return to rest. That is the whole sequence. Notice, recall, refuse, return. Think of giving a parcel to a carrier you trust. Once it has been accepted for delivery, you do not follow the vehicle through town and stop it at every intersection to take the parcel back, inspect it, and hand it over again. That would not improve the delivery. It would only keep you running after something you had already released. Well, anxious thought often behaves that way. It says, go get it back, examine it once more. Perhaps another hour of worry will make it safer. No, The returning impulse is not new information. It is an invitation to reaffirm the transfer. The care has been entrusted. Your part is to maintain the decision. This becomes especially practical at night. The room is quiet. Ordinary activity has stopped, and imagination begins producing tomorrow's catastrophes. Philippians 4 directs the mind toward what is true. That does not mean manufacturing a happy certainty about facts you do not possess. Truthful thought says, I do not know the result yet. I have completed what could be completed today. The morning has its proper tasks. God remains worthy of trust tonight. If one useful note will keep you from forgetting a legitimate duty, write the note. Put the task where you can find it in the morning. Then stop rehearsing it. A reminder may serve responsibility. Endless mental repetition does not. And if nothing responsible can be done until morning, then rest may be the responsibility of this hour. You are not neglecting tomorrow by sleeping tonight. Can you pray about the matter again? Certainly. Ask for fresh peace, ask for strength, ask for wisdom when new action is required. Bring honest feeling before God as often as necessary. But learn the difference between seeking renewed help and reclaiming the outcome. One says, Father, steady me as I continue to trust you. The other says, I have taken the whole future back and now I must carry it again. Those are not the same prayer. And do not turn persistent anxiety into a private test you must pass alone. If it becomes severe, continues to disrupt sleep or daily life, or overwhelms your ability to function, receiving support from a pastor, physician, counselor, or qualified mental health professional can be part of faithful responsibility. Help is not the enemy of trust. Appropriate help may be one of the means by which you take the next wise step. So when the care returns at midnight, do not condemn yourself and do not obey it. Notice it. Recall the surrender. Refuse the demand for control. Return to the duty of the hour, even when that duty is rest. Say it plainly. I do not have to renegotiate with every returning feeling. I reaffirm my trust, and I return to what is mine to do. That prepares us for the next boundary, because anxiety nearly always tries to move ahead of its assignment. It wants tomorrow's trouble carried tonight. But obedience can occur only in the time God has actually placed in your hands. That is why Jesus brings tomorrow into the teaching about anxiety in Matthew 6. He does not tell us to withdraw from life, ignore our needs, or become careless about what is coming. His instruction moves toward active priority. Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness. In other words, while anxiety is reaching for an unknown future, faith asks, what does God call me to pursue now? Do not misunderstand that. Refusing anxiety about tomorrow does not mean throwing away the calendar. It does not forbid preparation, saving, seeking counsel, or arranging a necessary task in advance. Wisdom may prepare for next week. Responsibility may set money aside, gather information, or reserve time for a difficult duty. But preparation and anxiety are not the same activity. Planning identifies what may need to be done and gives it a proper place. Pre-living imagines a feared outcome and repeatedly experiences its pain before anything has happened. Planning says, if this duty remains necessary tomorrow, this is when I will begin. Pre-living says, I must emotionally endure every possible ending tonight. One serves obedience. The other attempts the impossible. Jesus gives us a daily boundary. Each day has enough trouble of its own. That is not a gloomy saying. It is a merciful limit. Today is not required to contain Tuesday's uncertainty, Friday's pressure, next month's decision, and every possibility beyond them. Today has an assignment. Tomorrow will have one too, but tomorrow's assignment is not made lighter by suffering through it in advance. So ask, what belongs to today? Perhaps a telephone call can be made. Perhaps information should be gathered. Perhaps a decision must be reached before the day ends. Then do it. But if an action belongs to a later time, schedule it. If a fact cannot yet be known, allow it to remain unknown. If the result cannot be commanded, entrust it to God. Everything does not become today's duty merely because the mind can imagine it tonight. Here is a simple evening practice. Write down tomorrow's legitimate task. Beneath it, write the first clear step. Then pray over the outcome and acknowledge what you cannot control. After that, stop calling continued rehearsal preparation. You have recorded the duty. You have identified the beginning. You have brought the uncertainty before God. Another circuit through the worst possibilities will not improve the plan. Now return to the situations we have carried through this teaching. The appointment is scheduled. Its questions can be prepared when preparation is useful, but its entire result need not enter the room tonight. The bill has been opened, the facts have been reviewed, and a plan has been made. Tonight does not have to pay every future cost in advance through panic. The family conversation has an appropriate time. Words may be considered, counsel may be sought, and the heart may be prepared, but the other person's reaction does not have to be acted out repeatedly before the conversation begins. You see the boundary. A future responsibility may place one action on today's list, but it does not place every possible consequence on today's heart. Wisdom looks ahead far enough to recognize duty. Anxiety tries to move into the future and live there. Faith refuses that relocation. And when tomorrow arrives, grace will meet you there as surely as duty will. You will still pray. You will still think truthfully. You will still seek appropriate help and take responsible action. But you will do those things with the light, facts, strength, and opportunities available then, not with the frightening inventions of tonight. Hold on to this daily rule. Do today's duty in God's strength and leave tomorrow's outcome in God's care. Plan what wisdom requires. Do what today permits. Refuse to carry tomorrow before it arrives. Now we are ready to make the whole teaching personal, not with a vague intention, but with one actual concern, one result consciously entrusted to God, and one specific act of obedience placed where it belongs. The time to practice this is now. You do not need an emotional surge, and you do not need to tell anyone the private details. A quiet, definite decision is enough. If it is physically comfortable, open your hands before God. Let that simple gesture represent what you are releasing. You are not abandoning the person you love. You are not discarding the duty that belongs to you. You are releasing the anxious weight and the demand to govern what you cannot govern. Now name one care silently. Make it specific. Then name one responsibility that is truly yours. Not 10 steps, not the whole future, one faithful action. Finally, name one outcome you cannot control. Tell the truth about that boundary. Now say these words, quietly or aloud. Father, I place the anxious weight of this matter in your care because you care for me. My responsibility is this next faithful step. I receive your peace, I will do my part, and I leave the outcome with you. Take a moment and complete that prayer personally. Name the matter. Name the step. Name the result you are entrusting. Now, when will you take that step? If it can be done after this message, decide that. If it belongs at a particular time, put it there. If it requires appropriate help, decide whom you will contact and when. Do not leave obedience floating as a good intention. Give it a place. And if the anxious care returns, you already know what to do. Reaffirm the transfer. This weight remains in God's care. Speak what is presently true. I know my next responsibility. I do not know or control the final result. Then resume the duty assigned to you. You need not begin the whole struggle again. Maintain the decision and keep moving faithfully. You see, surrender is not passivity. It is the proper ordering of trust and action. The care is in God's hands. The next act of obedience is in yours. The outcome remains with Him. So keep the appointment without carrying its verdict beforehand. Face the bill without bowing to shame. Approach the needed conversation from peace instead of dread. Pray honestly, think truthfully. Seek help wisely. Do the next right thing. Open hands before God. Steady feet toward obedience. Release the burden, accept the duty, and leave the result with the one who cares for you.